Welcome to the social-engineer.org podcast number 102.
102.
Hey, Dave, you actually said the right number instead
of... I know. I'm going to switch it up today. Sorry.
Wow, man. I'm impressed.
He's cooperative today.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. This is the only time that I would be cooperative, but...
A solid start.
So we have our panel with us today. As you heard, Dave has graced us with his magical presence for once on the podcast.
Guess what? You didn't schedule the podcast during lunch. And guess who's here?
He's been his compliant presence today.
His compliant presence for once. And you're the ever sarcastic and lovely Ping. Ping-tastic, as she's calling herself today.
Yes, it is a fantastic day.
And back for the second round is Kat Murdoch. Hey, Kat.
Hello.
How you all doing today?
I'm fantastic.
I'm chipper.
You're chipper?
Yeah.
Man, we got some big words being used here.
I mean, chipper's not a big word.
I don't know. It sounds like a big word.
CHIPPER. That's not that many words.
Come on, I'm not that smart. Give me a break. So, besides being here and being chipper and happy and compliant, we're here to talk to a really good guest today, JJ Green. Now, before you go Googling that name, because if you do, you will find there's multiple JJ Greens, and we're not talking to the football player, but we're talking to the national security correspondent, JJ Green, from down in Washington, D.C. And he does some pretty fascinating things revolving around security in the world. Security not just from a cyber or internet perspective, but security just at a personal travel and world perspective. So I thought it would be a fascinating conversation to have JJ on and talk a little bit about how we stay secure in a world that seems to be increasingly insecure, and then especially when we travel. Now it seems to be a big topic for everyone. So what are some things we can think about in staying secure while we travel? So let's get JJ on the show now. We are back with our guest, JJ Green. JJ, nice to have you on the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
So maybe to start off, you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your work and what it is that you do.
Well, I'm the national security correspondent at WTOP Radio here in Washington, D.C. and WTOP.com. And I've been here for 13 years. It'll be 14 years on March 4th. And the objective of my position is to cover everything that relates to national security, from intelligence to espionage to terrorist to military, and everything in between, including cyber and crime, and basically a really hard look at foreign policy, everything that relates to national security.
So you obviously have a pretty in-depth view into the very topics that we are focusing on each and every day in our careers here as security professionals, focusing on those very same attacks that you brought up, like spies and espionage and internet-related security attacks, InfoSec attacks, things like that.
Yeah, those are the wheelhouse for me. I mean, it's much bigger than that, but lately, in the last year or two, it seems to all boil down to some element of cyber. Social engineering, as you guys deal with all the time, is at the heart of all of the problems that we're facing right now, specifically when it comes to cyber and hacking, when it comes to, in many cases, trolls, the Russian government, its activities, and others as well. So, yeah, this is becoming more and more a very topical scenario for me.
Is there a particular vector that you notice as being used more than others when you're looking at these attacks from your research?
What I will say is more and more people are becoming very sophisticated about how to use social engineering and to get what they want out of it, because they recognize, especially when you look at us here in the U.S., we're so distracted with social media and all of the tools that it encompasses. We're so distracted with the bells and whistles of this continually evolving medium that we forget about security. And, you know, all of us from time to time have found ourselves looking at a strange email and thinking, oh, this is okay. And then you have to catch yourself. Sometimes we don't. Many people simply don't know and don't care. Other people are, bottom line, just completely oblivious to all of the risks that go along with this. But from what I've heard from the FBI, the intelligence community for the last 3, 4, 5 years, the day is coming when we're all going to have to choose a very different way to communicate, because unless something serious happens with this whole element of social engineering, it's the whole social media world is simply going to be inundated with trolls and people that are looking to harm you.
So do you think that a certain type of delivery method is more advantageous for the attacker? Like, do you see email or phone or social media as being some of the main ways that they're performing these attacks?
Anymore, I think it's mobile. Mobile devices go everywhere. More people use them than they do, desktops these days. Mobile personal electronic devices can go on planes. They can go, in the subway. They can go anywhere. And that's where the real problems start to evolve, because I don't know if you guys paid a lot of attention to this a couple of years ago. A plane disappeared, headed to China, I believe, or from China to Kuala Lumpur. And it was from the Singapore Airways plane, and it was never found again. One of the things that came out of the investigation into this, and certainly ours here, was that there was a vulnerability in the entertainment system of that plane that possibly someone using a mobile device could hack into it. This is the problem with social engineering, because people can get into your phone, get into your mobile device, which goes anywhere. And then if you plug into or connect up with some network someplace else, that network, as you already know, is going to go down as well, is vulnerable as well. So I would say definitely mobile devices are a serious risk right now.
This is always like a weird, in my opinion, difficult debate, because I talk a lot about BYOD, right? Bring your own device policies that many large companies have. And the easy answer, of course, is you could say companies should just not have, BYOD policies. But as you say that, easy to say, almost impossible to implement, because now people communicate daily through their mobile devices and through their own personal devices. So if you're going to say you're not allowed to bring your own cell phone on site, then you have to provide some method of communication for each person. And now those people are going to most likely bring those devices home with them so they can communicate. Now it becomes almost like a personal device. So is there even a solution, or is it just, hey, this is the problem and it's going to occur, kind of like taxes and death?
Well, if you're talking government organizations, there's not going to be anything different to take place. They're simply saying, look, you can't bring that phone here. You can't bring that device here. You can't bring that Fitbit or that watch that you use to track your fitness, because of all of the risks that come along with just the ability of nefarious entities getting into that device and hiding so deeply that you may not even know it. But they could be alive and very organic in these settings and in these systems. So when it comes to government, that's simply just that's not going to change. They use their own people have these mobile devices, but they have to, in sensitive situations and sensitive places, they have to lock them up, shut them down. So in terms of the general public, I don't think that's going to go away. People are going to use these mobile devices wherever they go. I don't see that changing. What I do see changing is the education process for people who use them, because not only if you come into an organization or into a place with a cyber disease, as I call it,
Oh, nice.
There's going to be other people that could, be infected by it, and you are going to be the person that it's tracked back to. So you really, from an education point of view, want to know what you should and what you shouldn't do. And by all accounts, from the information I've gotten, people are eager to learn. It's just those people, and there's a lot of them out there that simply are clueless to all of the risk that are evolving day by day from these nefarious players out there that are looking to get into their devices.
So this is Ping. So I agree with you that the people are not really understanding that the risks associated with the technology they use, right? And actually, I have a keen interest in wearable devices, right? Because I feel they're like the next big, easy way to introduce more risk to your organization, right? Everyone's wants to have their Fitbit or their watch on, and they want to be recording their steps. They're not thinking about what could be passing through. So question for you is, do you feel that we could actually get in front of it? Because as you say, some people don't care. Some people are blissfully unaware because they kind of feel that nothing bad's ever happened to them, right? That they are aware of. Do you believe we can get in front of the problem? Because in the news is filled with a person's phone hacked, the Kardashian incident, right, in France, where she was posting all these things on social media, which then allowed her apartment to be broken into, and all of her jewelry and money stolen, and just using the technology, right? So I know that the desire, right, we have to fight that people's desire to be accessible and to use the technology to be perceived as cutting edge, but yet there's so much of it all the time. And people don't think, I'm going to put that smart refrigerator in my house, right? It's going to be great. It's going to tell me when I need to order milk, and it'll even order it for me. And meanwhile, Amazon wants to let people into, let us into your house. We'll deliver those things. And people think this is so convenient. It's so wonderful, that sacrifice they make. So do you believe we can get in front of it?
Well, yeah, but first we're going to have to catch up. And here's why I say that. The cool factor, we're still dealing with that. People are still suffering from, oh, that is cool, and still have not realized, as you mentioned very eloquently, the problem that we're facing is not the lack of capability. The problem that we're facing is lack of understanding of what it is we have in our hands and in our houses. Alexa's cool and Hey Google is cool and all that, but you have to understand that those devices are constantly listening. And if somebody hacks your stuff, your Wi-Fi, and by the way, if you don't change the factory password on your router in your house these days from the default to something else, you're vulnerable again. So there are so many evolving and more intensifying ways in which bad people can get into your devices that we really do have to catch up, start educating people more. And once we catch up, I do believe we can get ahead of it, but it's got to be a more intense focus placed on all of these vulnerabilities that all of these cool new devices bring into our lives. And I think this program, and I'm not saying this because you invited me on here to be the guest, and I'm happy that you did it, because I do have some things to share about it. But I've been saying for a while, there has to be more of a focus on, hey, when you're at the bus stop, get out of your phone, look at what's going on around you. Because if the bus hits the bus stop and takes everybody out because nobody's watching what's going on around them, then whose fault is that, aside obviously from the bus driver's fault and whatever triggered that whole incident? We have to take on some responsibility ourselves for all of the things that are going on around us. And obviously everybody here does, but I'm simply saying the folks out there in the general populace needs to be educated to that point. And once I think people get to that point, they will realize the value of getting past the cool factor and thinking, okay, what's the risk factor? And then engaging from there on. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
It does. And to me, it's a fascinating debate, but I still see a struggle because, in essence, technology companies are going to keep coming out with stuff that has the cool factor. Mm-hmm. And yet that's not going to enable us to get ahead of the game until we can get people educated enough to realize that, hey, just because the smart refrigerator is cool, or just because that you can control your thermostat from your phone doesn't mean that it's smart. Like, how does the average person even realize? Like, I can't tell you how many times I travel a lot, and one of my buddies, not in the industry, was saying, hey, you travel so much, you should have one of those remote thermostats so you can control your house while you're, overseas and things like that. And I was like, well, no, actually, the amount of vulnerability in those things is extreme. Well, that is something he didn't even know about. He wasn't aware that that was even the case. So how do we get people to that level of education?
Sadly, it's going to take some time. And a part of the real problem when it comes to that level of education about that specific and serious and dangerous issue is people around us on a daily basis are so caught up with their own daily lives that we're not listening. That's the real thing. There are lots of people like you guys that are out there that have been sounding this alarm for years, but there is simply this element of self-absorption that's been going on in the United States for forever, but has reached a fever pitch because of the element of new media and the element of new social engagement platforms that people have gone to a much greater extreme. I mean, a good example of what I'm talking about here, we have a very robust newsroom here with probably maybe 100 people engaging on a daily basis, doing whatever, everything from, general assignment reporting to editing to the managers to, the video team to the social media team. Quite often, sending out an email will not get a response, even though the people that have gotten the email got it and understand, but they're so busy that they don't even respond. And some people don't even think that it's important to respond. This is a part of the issue that I think is that has come upon us in the last years as a result of the frenetic pace of news and the breathless nature of newsrooms all across the country. But as the same thing is taking place in society. People are so busy that they have to figure out, how can I trim something off my plate? Oh, well, maybe I'll just ignore that email. I got it. I won't respond. But the thing is, being able to respond to people is a basic thing, something to me that's very important. And in our lives today, we're so busy with everything that's going on around us, we simply just don't take time to do things that we should do. And one of those things that we should do on a daily basis is, if there is, any kind of activity going on our phones or on our mobile devices, on our computers, we need to check them out. If there's some new device that's been introduced into our lives, into our homes, into our families' lives and homes, we need to check them out. But we also need to listen to what people are saying around us. Finding the time for people like you guys is incredibly important, because there is a very valuable and critical message that you're putting out. And that is, we really need to take a moment to figure out what's good and what's not so good for us when it comes to electronic devices.
So this is Kat. I agree with all of that. I am curious on your thoughts on the following. I sometimes get the impression that education only hits home under a certain set of circumstances. For example, TSA when you travel, could technically be taken as a learning experience where, okay, so hypothetically, TSA bans cell phones now because of the threat of something like the Malaysia Air flight happening again. But when they do that, it would be possible to go and learn from that moment. We would learn that, oh, well, this is a possibility. This is a vulnerability. Until we figure it out, this is keeping us all safe. But what that will probably wind up doing is irritating a bunch of people. Maybe it's like a little bit too paternalistic to really let the messaging hit home. So, but on the flip side, where else are you going to get an example other than someone saying, don't do this? Or if you listen to your friend, I don't know, for a while, I wouldn't use the Bitmoji keyboard because you would have to download a third-party app. And technically those third-party apps give the application software developers complete access to anything you type your keyboard always. And I was like, guys, I don't think this is wise. A lot of you work in roles where you should not be allowing access to your keyboard. But it didn't matter that I was modeling this. They just didn't do it. Sorry, friends, if you're listening. They were still very much like, no, I want to use this keyboard. So what is maybe the balance between like reasonable paternalism and leading by example and inundating people into scenarios where they are understanding that this experience is positive for their own benefit and education, because sometimes messaging just doesn't hit home.
Well, thanks for your question, Kat. And I have to be, I guess the person with the the downer here. I agree with what you're saying. We are at a point in our existence where we really have to probably have a really bad experience coming before the lion's share of our population here in the States and beyond get what it is that you guys are saying. And I hate to say this, in these terms, but we may need a 9/11 cyber moment before people start to get this. And I'll say this in the context of something that happened several years ago. The NBC station here in Washington asked me if I would host a program several years ago. It was called Breached, a cyber attack on America. At the time, on the program, I had the immediate past Director of National Intelligence, Mike McConnell, Roger Cressy, who was a former assistant to the president, I believe it was President Clinton and President Bush, on terrorism, and cyber was one of his big issues, and he's still doing a great job now in the private sector, and some other folks talking about what happens on the day you wake up and you can't get into your bank account, you can't start your car, the traffic lights are all down. What happens on that day? And that was a part of where that whole idea that I mentioned to you earlier about finding some new kind of currency to use, because the whole world essentially will be in the grip of a very nasty, destructive cyber attack. And then, it was the logic on that program was that is what would wake people up. But we hope that doesn't happen. Years have passed. People have continued to talk about the problem. But then you've had things like, war. You've had things like terror attacks. You've had incredible disasters, natural disasters that have happened. And people have forgotten about those things. Just like it's very hard now to get some people to remember the pain and the suffering that took place on 9/11, because it was a long time ago for some people, and some people don't even remember it. A lot of young people weren't born then. So the point that I'm making is it may actually be a fact of nature that we reach a point where something really tragic is going to happen because people have simply stopped listening. But there is hope, I think, in that people like you who go out and talk about this and use those horrible examples of disasters that have befallen us, because, as Benjamin Franklin said, those who forget their history are doomed to repeat it, and continue to hammer away at that in your own way, in all of our own ways. I think people eventually will come around, but something more has to happen on a more consistent basis to get people to see that we cannot continue to introduce all these really cool things and do all these really wonderful enabling things without considering the risks that come along with them.
So I don't disagree, because I think that what I've seen, at least from a corporate perspective, is that one of two things occurs to get people in line with taking the proper action. And the first is what you said, is something bad happens. There's a breach, there's an attack, there's an insider threat. Something occurs, and all of a sudden they're like, whoa, we need to fix the problem. How do we do this? How do we fix the problem? And then people like our company or Dave's company are called in to help test and fix the problems that occur. But there is, from a corporate perspective, I don't think personal. I agree with personal that it's not there yet. But from a corporate perspective, I feel that we are seeing a small increase, and maybe Dave, you can tell me if you're seeing this too on your end, but a small increase in the number of companies that are now saying, wow, I've watched the news. I've seen the bad things happening to my fellow businesses. It hasn't happened to me. I don't want it to happen to me. So we're going to take some preemptive measures to start education, training, and testing.
I think if you look at what companies are doing, they're recognizing that maybe peers in their industry, or they've experienced a breach themselves, or there's a strong security program where they really do try to educate users, put more defenses in place. And I would say last year, we're seeing more companies adopt more stringent security controls around their environment and their users, and trying to get more visibility into that to try to prohibit that. But at the end of the day, it still comes down to the cost that it takes, and do they think that risk is large enough for them to be able to make that investment to reduce that risk. But that's we still see a lot of companies out there that's not the case, right? It's still very fragmented all over the board.
So translating that, right? So we're seeing that experience from both of us, and we're just two companies. And Ping, are you seeing that from your angle and what your company is experiencing with your clients too?
Absolutely. That they're trying to provide more education and training and awareness. But I have to really agree with JJ that companies will do their part, almost kind of like the new parent, right? Like, we must learn this, we must embrace this. But employees or users just need to start really integrating that and using it in every part of their lives, right? Taking the lessons that they may be given at work, taking it into their personal lives. And I have to agree that we have a very distracted society, and becoming more attentive to and more aware of our surroundings would be beneficial, right? Because then they become more aware of the technology and the possible pitfalls and issues with that. But yeah, I agree with the trend. It's the same trend that Dave indicated that he sees with their clients. I just wish that we would see the same trend, with the population en masse. And I don't know how to overcome that, right? Like, you have hope. Like, it's great that our kids will have much more greater access because of the technology, but I'm also very afraid because every access is just like an open window in your house.
Take a quick break from the show to talk about what's going on in all of our lives. Hey, Dave, did you get accepted to Black Hat training this year?
I did get accepted to Black Hat training this year, so I'm super excited and giving an awesome course. We gave this course last year, and it's basically like a red versus blue type of thing, where 2 days are for red and understanding red team tactics, and then the other 2 days are basically going through how to detect what we did for 2 days. So it should be an awesome course, and whole simulated environment, and really excited to be there.
Dave, what's the name of the class?
The name of the class.
Basics here, basics.
So you just put me on the spot here, and I don't know the name of the class exactly.
Oh, all right.
Hang on. Give me a second. I'm working on it.
Let me tell you what's going on in the world of social engineer. So Ping doesn't yell at me. April 16 through 19, we have our joined CSI Tech and SECOM Advanced OSINT class in Scranton, Pennsylvania. From 21 to 25 of May, we have our Advanced Practical Social Engineering class in Bristol. That class is about a quarter full, so we still got some seats in there. And then we did get accepted to Black Hat, and I'm really excited because 2 classes got accepted to Black Hat. We have our APSE class, which we've been teaching there for the last 5 years. And we have our advanced practical open source intelligence class for social engineers, which is a 2-day class. And we'll be doing that twice, 2 2-day classes there at Black Hat too. So we got a pretty full training roster. I don't know yet if we're accepted to Derby when that opens up. So we'll announce that down the road, but that will be all the training left for 2018.
I have any say in it, definitely not, but that's fine.
See? So we may not be at Derby this year, folks, so you'll be doing SC Village at DEF CON, which we're planning.
Right, and definitely get all of your SE, cravings fulfilled before Derby, because you don't know if you'll see Chris there.
Right. I may not be accepted back this year, so I may just be at DEF CON doing the SE Village, but SECTF is live as we speak right now, so you better sign up. We've only been live for like 4 days, and we have over 100 people that have already registered for that. Our CFP is live for the SE Village, so if you want to speak at SE Village this year, make sure you get over to the social-engineer.org site and fill that out really quick, because we only have 14 slots, and we know that we're going to have way more people submit like we did last year. Okay, well, that's all we got time for the commercial, so let's get on back to the show. Like, I've literally seen, not just on YouTube videos, but seen people walking down the street so attached to their devices that they trip and fall, or they walk into poles, or they're so disconnected from other humans and the environment. Sitting in a subway nowadays, or you're not with people, and you're just with other people's phones. It's not uncommon to see my children and their friends sitting watching TV, but also on their phones at the same exact time. Like multiple pieces of technology now. Playing video games on an Xbox, but still on Instagram or on Snapchat, and they're with each other in a chat in the same exact room.
About a year or so ago, I did a talk at a university here. Part of what I was asked to talk about there was the Russian meddling that we saw developing. And I had done some research and I did a series of podcasts on that. But one of the things that came up in the course of the conversation was what you were just talking about, was just the layering of the social media distraction, multiple devices and multiple engagements all going on at once, more and more. And one person in the room asked me what I thought could be the solution to that. And after the Edward Snowden leaks in 2013, every national security journalist here in Washington that I know simply started using pen and paper again. I'm not saying that's what the world needs to do at this point, but I'm saying people somehow, under some circumstances, are going to have a pen and paper moment when they realize that the scenario that they're engaged in at that moment is a sensitive one, or that the scenario they're engaged in with multiple people is not one that's productive for what it is they're hoping to get out of it, because there are too many competing voices, too many competing devices. People have to realize at some point, how can I minimize, not stop my use of devices, but minimize the amount of engagement at one time or at multiple times that I'm engaged in. I guess what I'm trying to say is people have to start to step back from this more, faster pace that we're at, and start moderating the way in which they engage. And I do have a bit of a suggestion that I have tried to implement. I don't know that this would actually work on a broader scale or not, but what I've been trying to do is every person that I meet, encourage them, you're probably going to laugh, but I encourage them to pick up a pen and a piece of paper and write a note to someone in place of one of the emails or one of the texts that they send.
I appreciate that. I'm a handwriter myself. And yesterday was National Handwriting Day. And that's actually for many of my friends who feel disassociated, right? They're on Facebook, they're on Twitter, they have a lot of outlets, email, SMS, but we all work remotely. So they expressed to me that they feel disassociated too, even though they know they have friends and know people, but they don't see them and they don't interact with them. And I said, well, why don't you just get a postcard the next time you're like on an engagement, you're in San Francisco, wherever, pick up a postcard and just send it to somebody you know, your mom, your dad, somebody, just be like, hey, I'm here. And it's really important because that action, psychology wise, activates a different part of your brain, uses a different part of your brain. And that's important.
Yeah. So not only does sending that postcard tell that person a little bit of information about what's going on with you, but they get some forensics on you. They get to see your handwriting. They get to hear how you're feeling. They get to plug in with you to some degree on a physical level. And so this whole thing does not discourage the use of electronic devices. What it does is it encourages using natural means of communicating, handwriting, speaking in person, in addition to electronics. And
I think that's super important to teach the younger generation. And so my stepdaughter's too young to have a phone, thank goodness, and I hope it lasts for a while. But sometimes I'm like, oh, it would be great if I could send Eloise a message right now. Like, I have a thought for her. And so I've taken to writing her a postcard that I stick in her lunchbox with like a silly little thought, and it empowers her and it gets her into the world of like, oh, maybe letters will make her feel special. And maybe in the future, when I'm sure, she has a space suit she can fly around in and like message people on other planets, she will be like, no, letters are important and can hold up a solid place and can ground people together a little bit more often. So I think that's awesome. And I think, trying to encourage that among ages and socioeconomic classes and, backgrounds is really important. So that's awesome.
What's interesting is last month we had a young man on the podcast who was part of a malicious hacktivist group called UG Nazi back in the day. And their only goal in life was to hack companies to humiliate them. They didn't do it for massive financial gain. They did it for laughs. They did it so they could embarrass other people. And they didn't really care about how it affected the end user or others and their lives or their livelihood. They just did it because they could. During the discussion, we kind of like this, we had this big, heavy discussion about how to fix that, how to, what can be put in place. And it's kind of like fell into the same C-level discussion as always, which is what piece of technology can help fix that? And funny enough, the answer was something really simple from him. And it was that he had no good parental guidance that helped him to balance his natural talents with a smart outlet. And kind of what I'm hearing here during this discussion is, we have a potential issue, right? We have a problem in society, and it's not going to be fixed by the cell phone companies slowing down on technology. It's not going to be fixed by changing people's perception of technology, because that's going to be an impossibility. It's not going to be changed by some government entity. It's going to be changed by proper education from the starting level. So like in my case, it's my job to teach my two children how to properly manage and handle technology while still remaining in touch as a human with communications. It's not their teacher's job. It's not your job. It's not their employer's job down the road. It's my job to do that as a parent. And if I successfully do that, there will be at least two humans on Earth that have that moral structure. If Kat does that with her child, then she'll have that, and Dave, so on and so forth. There'll be that job as the parent's job or the gatekeeper's job, in essence, to raise the next generation with those standards and morals.
Yeah, but that's so hard though, because there's so, like, you are an advocate for your children. There's so many children who don't have that luxury.
They're just disengaged, right? And that's actually falls into what JJ's talking about. People are disengaged even from raising their children.
Yeah, exactly. And what really may be a bit of a help, you guys are talking about this, and the things that you're doing are absolutely amazing and marvelous. The postcard in the note in the lunch bucket, and the letters, and just the taking a moment to chat and to talk with your kids. Maybe just if there's an opportunity to engage with somebody that's not our kid that may need it, might be an opportunity moving forward. I've found a number of people that I know that I see in the course of my work, and if there's an opportunity, I'll share a little something with them, a little bit of wisdom that may be of use to them. And the one thing I'm always talking about is personal engagement. So you guys are onto something here, and I think, I'm not sure when you're going to do your next one, but you might actually have something here that could catch on into a national movement here.
We have a conference that we do once a year called DEF CON. It's out in Vegas. Our group runs contests that we call the Social Engineering Capture the Flag for Kids. And you have to be between 5 and 12 years old to join. And we teach them hacking skills, but they're not allowed to use a computer. They have to use paper and pen. They have ciphers they have to solve. They have crypto challenges. They have to pick locks. They have to do things that are hackery, if that's a word even, but they have to do it without the use of technology. And, it got pretty popular over the years, and there's a lot of places now that want to duplicate that and have that. And it's an interesting outlet. What we've seen is A lot of the kids that started with us 4 years ago when we started this thing, now outside that age group, and they begged us to come up with something for teenagers. So we just last year started the SECTF for teens, and kind of the same philosophies where they have to, take now more difficult challenges and accomplish these with the use of very little technology. But that's on small scale. We're talking the 20 to 40 kids that we affect per year, for 2 days, and then they go away. This seems like something that needs to be a continual process with the next generation. So, because I agree that, telling people like doom and gloom, like, technology is evil and it's going to kill the world, I don't think that's a right messaging. Telling people they need to be afraid of every device that comes in their home, I don't think that's the right messaging either. I think that there's ways to use all the technology we talked about in secure and safe manners. Would it be nice if the manufacturers of those technologies put more effort into creating secure devices before they release them to the public? Yes, but I'm not sure if that is something that's going to ever change in the near future.
I saw a 60 Minutes episode several months ago regarding the delay factor on the smartphone with a couple of apps. I won't name them, but the point that was made was that those delays were built in to engage the brain. The reward sector of the brain needed that reinforcement of, okay, so what do I have here? Do I have some tweets or do I have some posts coming in? And when you tap into the phone, there's a delay. Well, based on what was said during the course of that interview was that the manufacturer built that into the phone deliberately, built that into the app deliberately. And that, I think, is something that has to be taken into account too by people employing and using the devices and the apps, and knowing that when they engage in, telling kids about that, or grown-ups as well, may be one of the elements along the way that can help, just to be aware that, you shouldn't be afraid of these things, but there are some things that you need to know. And I think you guys are well on your way to doing that kind of thing.
It's interesting. We had a guest on, Dr. Paul Ekman. He's one of the founders around the research of microexpressions and nonverbal communications. And he has this concept that when he studied the reward center, right, dopamine and the chemicals that get released in the brain when we're rewarded, and how violent video games have created that reward for kids. So, they go and they do something that we would never want our kids to do, like, shoot someone plain in the head with a sniper rifle, and they're rewarded for it. And it kind of teaches them, hey, this is a good thing. This is the way you get rewarded. I'm not saying that everyone who plays those games is going to go out and do that in real life, but he had this concept: is there a way to create a game that will give the same mental reward, the same dopamine release, but for something positive? Something that would reinforce a positive. Now, he hasn't yet figured that out, but I just thought what you said was an interesting concept, is that, figuring out how to use technology to elicit good behaviors and to reward when the right type of action or attitude or activity is taken. It's another interesting concept. I don't think we'll solve it on this podcast, but it is definitely fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, JJ, I really appreciate you coming on. This is a conversation that I did not plan going this direction, but wow, how interesting the direction that it took.
Well, thank you for having me on your show. I have enjoyed this immensely. It's rare that I get to step out of the bullets, bombs, and thoughts and all of that and engage on a level like this. These are things that I believe are good for humanity.
I appreciate that. So, if people want to follow you, if they want to know more about you or see what you're doing, like you said, you gave some speeches. If they want to, where would they go to get more information on you?
Well, I would suggest the first place to go is to my Twitter feed, which is the letter J, the color green, one word. That's J Green at jgreen WTOP. That's Whiskey Tango Oscar Papa. But if you want to find out what I think, I have another Twitter feed that's at NatSec09. That's National Security Abbreviated 09. And that is every moment of the day, something is going on related to what I'm doing. I posted there. There is a WTOP.com authors page. You have my bio and, all of the work that I'm doing there. I would encourage people to check out the Target USA podcast. That is the thing that I am most passionate about right now. We just had our 100th episode a week ago, and we are doing really well. We cover all of the issues, events, people, and places relating to national security. And last week on our 100th episode, we had on a guy who intersected across 3 very distinct episodes of U.S. national security. From the Cold War, he told us a story about a day when he had to sneak out. He's worked for the CIA, mail a letter without getting caught. It was below zero and he was sweating. He talked as well about his role in locating Osama bin Laden. He was very instrumental in that. He also talked about how he was poisoned, interestingly enough, and survived during the course of tracking bin Laden. And he also talked about his role in the Edward Snowden scenario after Snowden was revealed. So Target USA is the way, if you ask me.
That's a great way to promote with a cliffhanger. You gave the tidbits, but no real information. That's great. I love it. And they're gonna have to go listen. That's awesome. One question we always ask is we have a lot of people who are listeners who are avid readers. So, and it doesn't have to be about the topic you talked about. It could be really anything. But is there a particular book that you would recommend that our readers look into?
Yeah, the book hasn't been written yet. I promise you I'm going to write that book. I've been working on it for a while. I promise you I'm going to write it. But the book that I would recommend people read is called American Radical: Inside the World of an Undercover Muslim FBI Agent. And this book is written by Tamer Elnoury, who joined us on our podcast not too long ago. He had his voice disguised because he's still active. And here's the guy who is actually now deep inside both Al-Qaeda and ISIS. The story speaks for itself. He actually told us a story about how he actually gets into character. And he also told us the story about the day in which they were all called into a room and he knew that he'd been exposed, how he got out of that. But it's called American Radical: Inside the World of an Undercover Muslim FBI.
I'm marking that down now, taking a note to put that in the show notes. Really appreciate that. That sounds like something that would be right up the alley for a lot of the people who listen to this podcast. So,
and thank you guys so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you for coming on. I look forward to having you back. I know we lost some of the panel. They had to go to other meetings, but I look forward to keeping in touch with you. So thank you so much.
Roger that.
Well, Kat, we lost the rest of the panel, so it's just us chickens again. But
so sad.
That was a fascinating conversation.
It really was. That was lovely.
I had this plan, when I talked to JJ, that we were going to come on and talk about security while traveling and staying secure in an insecure world, because that is kind of topics that resonated with him. And we just totally took a 180 and did a completely different direction.
Yeah, but it was fascinating and very organic, which is always fun.
Yeah, I'm not complaining. I think that was a good one. And, I think it's important, though, to mention that these kind of topics can always sound like major downers. We're talking about problems in technology and our future generations, and it sounds like there's no hope. But I feel that, last month, as I did last month, that the answers are maybe more simplistic than we give them answers to. And I agree with what you said, that there may not be that same answer for every kid, because not every kid has an advocate fighting for them. But we have to start somewhere.
Absolutely.
Right? And that, for me, that means starting with my own kids, as I have over the years of their life, and then branching that out to other kids to affect them as I can with what I do, like we do with the SECTFs at DEF CON, and just spreading that. When people call and say, hey, can I take that idea and use it at our con? I'm like, yes, please do it.
Yep.
And then we get Amanda on, and she shares all of our details with them because, it's not something I want to own. I want everyone to be able to have a chance to do this. So it's important. Who knows what that will do?
Make influence where you can control your influence. And you're trying to maximize that, which is awesome.
I like that. That should be a t-shirt. So if you want to follow us, Kat, what's your Twitter?
My Twitter is @CatMurdoch. That's cat with a C, and the O in Murdoch is a 0.
And I'm a human hacker. Our corporate is SOC Engineer Inc. And of course, you can follow if you're interested in the Innocent Lives Foundation, which is our new nonprofit that we started to help unmask child predators. That's at innocentlivesfoundation.org. Twitter account there is innocent.org. You can follow our other websites at social-engineer.org and social-engineer.com. Hopefully we'll get to see you at one of the upcoming classes or conferences. If not, stay tuned for next month. See you. Stare into the embers on the 1st of November and remember you were born on